Thanks for joining us on the NRT Now podcast, part of the largest Christian music site online, newreleasetoday.com. Sit back and relax as we chat with your favorite artists, introduce you to new artists, and more. Now here's your host, Jake.
Hey, welcome to episode 75. Just want to say thanks so much for spending the time with us here for this episode. And if you haven't already, make sure that you are following or subscribed or whatever that looks like on your favorite podcast platform. And not only does that help us out and help spread the word from your favorite artists and help share their stories, but you also know when new episodes come out, so double bonus. And one of the things that always fascinates me is just how our senses trigger memories for us, like the smell of grandma's kitchen or the taste of that one food that never really sat well and you had that bad experience. And you're probably thinking about it right now, and yikes. But one of the other more powerful ones is music. You can hear a song and be instantly transported back to whenever you heard that song or whatever that season was in your life. And for me, that 2008 to 2012-ish era was marked by a lot of Lincoln Brewster music. And I tell the story... I want to say it was about that 2008 range, that a buddy of mine that I worked with, he and I both liked a lot of the same music, and we played Lincoln Brewster's song every day. It seemed like every day. We did that a lot for worship. It was in one of his playlists as well, and it got to be a running joke for us in actually pretty short order. And he would run past my office going, "Every day," and then just run off. I'd yell after him, "You jerk!" But it just became a running joke between the two of us. And after both of us had moved jobs, moved on, I moved down to Texas. And we don't talk a ton, but every once in a while we'll get together. And that's the first thing out of the middle of nowhere. I'll get a text that says "every day," and I know exactly what he's talking about and give him grief back. But when I listen to Lincoln Brewster's music, especially from that time, it just really brings me back to that period of time. I mean, I had "So Good" as my ringtone for a while. Y'all remember what ringtones were? Man, it seems like ringtones are a thing of the past, just a sidebar, but I don't think that I've had my new phone on ring at all in the few months that I've had it. But yeah, back when ringtones were a thing, I had "So Good" from the Real Life album as my ringtone. So it was really awesome to be able to have this conversation with Lincoln. We promoted a show. We'll talk about this a little bit in the episode. But we promoted a show for him, and he's kind of been the inspiration of why I've used some of the gear that I have when I play guitar. And he talks a little bit about NAMM, which is a huge music trade show that happens most years in California. And man, that would be my dream to go there one day. But there's so much gear and there's so much that happens around guitar. There's so much that goes into it. So many decisions that happen. And you guitar players know what I'm talking about. If you're not a guitar player, then you will be by the time you get done with this episode, I feel. But it's always fun to talk gear, to talk process with someone who plays guitar as well. And so I'm excited to share this conversation with you, and I think it'll lead to more gear talk, more kind of guitar process, and maybe some other ideas that we have down the road. But for now, like I said, I'm excited to share this conversation with Lincoln Brewster, and here we go. So we are here with Lincoln Brewster, and man, Lincoln, I felt the need to do this interview over my Strat while holding my Strat here. Like, it just only seems appropriate.
I see that. I feel so at home just instantly. I feel like I know you.
I mean, it's not the Lincoln Brewster special. I mean, it's blue, it's not gold, so it's not quite right, but
I think I can get over that. I'm a little hurt, but It's okay. I'll get over it, and we'll get you set up.
That has to happen. I mean, this is just like the scrub version of it. We got to get like the pro version, the Lincoln Brewster special happening here.
Yeah, we gotta get your game upped, as it were.
I mean, I could have come with my PRS or one of my 2 PRSs, but
take it back. Take it back. Take it back.
I just couldn't do it.
I've known Paul a long time, and I think he makes great stuff too. It's the nice thing is there's so many good options out there, but just mine's better.
Are you like me? Like you go into Guitar Center and my wife puts me on the leash. Like you have no money to spend, but you can look.
You're doing better if she goes in with you. My wife won't go in anymore. She's over it. I used to go in there. It's really weird. I think musicians have this combination inner child and post-apocalyptic zombie combo where they just roam around and it's aimless like a lost puppy, and just it's like, hey, so what are you interested in today? And it's like all of it. Just literally all of it. Anything. Well, do you play that instrument? No, but I want to go into the acoustic room. I don't play guitar, but I just want to roll around on the floor, curl up under the bench and eat a candy bar. Just, I don't know. Everyone loses their mind when they go into music stores. It's all the packaging and the smell and.
Oh my goodness, the smell! Like you walk into Guitar Center or any store and.
Oh yeah, and everybody complains about all the like crazy, riff wars and stuff, or people playing Stairway, but we all love it. Like the worst thing in the world would be to walk into Guitar Center and it's like silent.
Yeah,
that would just be wrong. My favorite thing, I saw this was year before last. I go into Guitar Center and I wish I had filmed this. So there was, like how they have those rows of amps.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they make them tall enough where unless you're standing, you can't really see even across the other side. So there's definitely a barrier. And these 2 guys were trying out amps on either side of the wall. And one of you could just see this coming. One guy played a lick and then the other guy like answered.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing.
And they started getting a jam going, but they couldn't see each other. It was so good.
See, my luck is there'd be like this 8-year-old kid on the other side just tearing me up.
Just shredding you. Oh, what's that? There was a diagram, like a little pie chart that came out. I don't know if you saw it, which was the average emotional life of a musician.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Oh, it's too funny. And then, it's got the big pie chunks, like self-doubt, this, that, all these things. And then one of them was crippling fear of child prodigies.
There's a kid at my church. His mom is the worship director for us. The kid is insanely talented, still working up kind of the confidence. And it's just like, I hate you, kid. Super good kid, super quiet kid, but he picks up drumsticks and he's on it. Like he's learning guitar, and it's like me at his age would be nowhere even capable to even do that.
Right.
And she sent me a video of him at a lesson. I'm just like, Rachel, no, just stop. I feel bad.
You're like,
now.
hey buddy, have you ever thought about bass?
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Oh
yeah,
man.
Yeah.
Gearing up a little bit. One of the things that I've always done is I've been a Line 6 guy, and part of it was stage noise at the time, before we had all the in-ears, which it's crazy to me to think about. Just when I started getting involved in worship and stuff, I had the floor wedges. It was so noisy. And then now it's just like silent on stage. We have with all the in-ears and all that's just coming out now.
Yeah.
But, started off with the Line 6 X3 Live was kind of my first big boy pedal. And I'm like, well, do we not? And then I saw Lincoln Brewster having the X3 Live. And it's like, okay, if it's good enough for Lincoln, like it's good enough for me.
All right. That's good. I hope it worked well for you. There's lots of backstory, more than we have time to cover with all that stuff, but it's been an interesting journey to how to get a tone that really works. That's a good tone. That's consistent. For me, it the catalyst for really being committed to making that work was traveling. Was, you know, they were all fly dates. I did a season when I was with Michael W. Smith where it was just pedal boards and backline gear. And it was the worst experience. It like made me want to stop playing guitar. Some nights you'd get a great amp and it worked great with pedals. And then the next night you would get something that was almost unusable. You know, so I'm playing a 2-hour show that, and I'm like embarrassed the whole time. I just kept, you know, like, sorry. I think part of my passion about tone is I've never, ever wanted anybody to have to endure my playing.
I get that. Either
the part or the sound. Like I want when I'm playing and I play a solo that it's pleasing and enjoyable. And so I think ever since I was really young, you know, tone was like a huge part of the picture. And I just always wanted to have a really good, pleasing, singy, melodic tone.
Well, it's funny you're talking about those fly dates because I actually had to endure that because of you. Thank you very much.
Oh.
It was a while back in Casper, Wyoming. You did a youth night for us, kind of a youth-centered concert, and we had to hunt all over town just to find a good amp. I mean, I think it was for stage noise for you. Mostly.
Oh, yeah.
But,
yeah.
I mean, we had to go through, like, I think we wound up getting you a Mesa Boogie dual rec for that concert. And, man, it was so hard to find. Like, we had to basically rent it from a local music store. That was cool. They were really supportive of that kind of stuff in the community. But, yeah, we started looking at all of us, and none of us had anything anywhere comparable to even look at that. It's like, well, here we go. Like, thankfully, they had the dual rec that it wound up working well, but and it's just so tough to find that sometime.
It really is. And any amp with an effects loop worked great. All I was really doing was just running an output, like you said, for stage volume, because with the quiet stages, my issue with the quiet stages in venues that aren't basically an arena is the smaller the venue gets and you have acoustic drums on the stage and people are, they're closer to the stage physically. So you have the drum acoustic volume coming off the stage, and then you have everything else coming off of a PA that's up in the air and maybe even further away from them than the drums are. And it's a really weird thing. And so we started using amps on stage, not for us, just to have some energy sonically coming off of the stage near the drum kit, and that actually helped. And then sometimes too, for me, if I was playing on a hollow stage, it was less of a factor, especially if I was like standing, if the subs are under the stage.
Yep.
As long as I can feel things moving, then I don't need the amp, because I can't hear it. I can just, my joke is always it shakes my pant legs. But on stages where the drums are up there and I can't feel the PA because the subs are in the air or whatever, then having some air movement on the guitar was a big factor. So it would just depend. And so we would always typically just try to have a backline amp of some sort.
That show I got to drool over. I think you had the HD 500 at that point, the Line 6.
Oh, yeah.
Just in the Evolution. And, got to drool over that. I think I actually implemented that in an effects loop like you were talking about in an amp.
Yeah.
So where you had the amp front end and then the HX for just the effects side of it. But yeah, man, it was so fun to see that. But what's crazy is now, what was it, a year or two ago, I had to use an X3 Live again. And I'm like, this thing is junk. Like back at the time, it was so great. It was awesome. And then you come back and you're like, I use this? This is crazy.
Yeah, the build quality on those things was not, they were plastic and, they were built kind of like toys. And people used to wonder why I had two of them on stage. Like literally I had them sitting right next to each other. And it was literally because one was a backup because they would go down. They were not roadworthy. In fact, we played at Angel Stadium for a Harvest Crusade. And in the middle of the day, the stage is out there by second base. It gets really hot on the stage and it melted the screen.
Oh, geez.
Like bubbled, and it completely smoked my X3 Live screen. So we had to like put cloths over them and stuff. And they're just not made for that. But the great thing for me about that unit was there's one amp. Well, there's more than one. There's a couple. But the one amp model I always used was that Variac Plexi. And it didn't come stock on it. It came with a like an expansion thing. And then there's a cabinet that it had, a specific cabinet, and the 57 mic is actually mislabeled for on axis, off axis is incorrect.
Really?
Yeah, and strangely, that combination was the only thing I ever fell in love with. And even my setting on the HD 500, I was trying to recreate that. I never really got it. I got close, but I never had that same sound. So I've since recreated that and better with some real stuff being, profiled and stuff like that. But
and what you're talking about, that X3 Live not being roadworthy, I had the carry case that came with it. That strap fell off more than once, so that thing took a dive more than once. So I took it in to get repaired because some of the switches were being funny, and they said literally that half the circuit board was like falling apart. So
yeah.
You can't see it behind here, but right behind the camera now, I have this huge like pedal train. It's in a flight case. It's heavy duty. It weighs like 8,000 pounds when I try and haul it around. But just because of that experience, I'm like, that's never happening again.
Yeah, it was a great bang for the buck sonically and the features and stuff. But just when it came to traveling, it was a rough go.
Now we have like the HX effects, the Helix, the HX, all the Line 6 side. Now the Kempers are coming through. We have the fractal audio. That's just, all these things are coming out now. What I remember about that X3 was one button was for each effect. So you had your
That's
overdrive
correct.
pedal, you had your delay stomp or whatever, and you're really limited. Now with what we have coming out, just the technology difference is just insane what we can do now. Like what you were talking about, the profiling and everything.
Yeah, the profiling is pretty unreal. I'm not sure the exact time frame. I would hope in the next couple months, but I'm actually getting ready to release a whole swath of profiles and impulse responses and everything, and actually presets for Line 6 stuff, but a full kind of tone library.
Sign me up. So what I've done, because I love this gear talk. As we're getting set up here, we're just talking. We could probably talk gear this whole episode, which eventually we should probably move on. But and just the fascination of what we can do with this. I've kind of moved to a hybrid digital analog. So I have a few analog pedals. I have a bunch of Line 6 stuff still on the board.
Yeah.
And what's really cool with like this HX Stomp now is we can have analog all the way through up until you get to that amp modeling, or now we can really mix and match and route signal like 8 different ways. And the difference from that X3 Live, however many years ago that was, to just what we have now, what's happened in that last few years is just insane.
Yeah, it's a great time to be a guitar player. There's so much available. One of the things, maybe we can connect again and do one on just gear stuff, but one of the dangers right now for players is actually decision fatigue because there's so much. So that's going to be one of the things when I release my libraries. I'm going to have them organized in a way that's different than what's currently available, with some videos that I'll do that kind of will help somebody take the journey. I think there's products available that I would equate to baby's first flamethrower for guitar players. It's just not, it's too much. And guitar players, if you think about back to the 50s, 60s, it was very simple. Everybody loves those tones. And I go, you got to go back to what was available. And there wasn't much. It was a Les Paul into an AC30 or, and it's got a handful of knobs and it's hard to make sound bad, and now we've kind of convoluted things and, hey, there's 1,000 presets in this. And it's like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to go through 1,000 presets.
Yeah. You want to get your rig set up just to play. And then 2 hours later, all of a sudden you've done nothing but play with all the presets and the effects.
Yeah. And you're through like 50 of them, hey, check this out. This is the room I'm doing these will be where my impulse responses are coming from.
Oh my gosh. That is insane.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch.
We need to pause for a second while I get the drool wiped up.
This is pretty cool. This is my, back in my Steve Perry days, this is my cab I used on the album and the tour. And that little white dot is from, that's where my mic was placed. And actually, Eddie Van Halen's tech, who was his manager up until he died, Matt Bruck, actually helped me dial my sound in for Steve. And so if you listen, I don't know if you saw the video I did for Fender, the Christmas video that had Silent Night and Miraculum.
I'm not sure if I did. It's possible.
It was back around Christmas, but if you go on Fender's YouTube and look at that, you can listen to the Silent Night and then the Miraculum. On the Miraculum track, that's that 68 plexi with an Echoplex in front of it, like the real deal. And then that's an IR I made from that cabinet. It just came out really good. That cabinet's always sounded really good. So, but all that stuff will be available. Same with I just released something on my social channel. It's a chapel service I did for NAMM. That's a Kemper profile of my 2-rock of the classic reverb signature with that same IR.
To touch on the Steve Perry real quick as we get towards kind of like your story in the album, because like we were saying earlier, so easy to get lost in the gearhead.
Oh yeah, right.
Man, one of my favorite videos anytime Lincoln Brewster comes up is the long hair, shoulder length, wavy hair Lincoln Brewster in 1994, the tank top, like total 80s, 90s style.
Yeah.
And the part of it, I think we'll link it as we promote the episode here, but there's a moment where you and Steve are fighting over the microphone. He's trying to screw with you on the guitar side.
Yeah.
It's so much fun to get to see. That's Lincoln Brewster in 94. You know, with Steve Perry, he's one of the biggest names in music at the time, you know, to now just seeing what you get to do in the Christian music space and as a worship leader and, you know, taking that into where you're at now. It's just so fun to see just that difference and a little bit of that path as it comes through.
Yeah. Wild ride. I mean, someone just sent me a link to another concert that's out there I think we were in Toronto. I think Steve and I had a cool connection. A lot of the music back then, a lot of the band dynamics was centered around lead singer, lead guitar player. And I grew up on that stuff. So I think I took to it naturally. And then just relationship wise, we always had a good relationship and we still stay in touch today. So we still text and talk occasionally. And yeah, it was fun to look back. I watched one of the other ones. Oh, it was funny. One of them, there was a comment in it that actually talked about some guy going, "Oh, I saw them in San Francisco on that tour, and there was this pretty blonde girl in the crowd, and I started talking to her." And he goes, he writes blah and blah blah blah, and then she was like, "Oh, that's my boyfriend playing guitar," and it is now my wife.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I'd also heard, so my worship pastor back in Casper, the place that we were talking about earlier, he was in a band way back in the day. And one of the stories that he tells, Steve Perry invited them out to dinner at one point, you know, bought dinner because he's a rock star, all the stuff. But he wanted to talk a little bit about faith and just kind of their journey. Did you guys do any of that while you guys were on the road as well? Or was that something that kind of stayed out?
Oh, no, I talked about it from very early on. I was a young believer at the time, but no, I was always talking to Steve about Christianity. And interestingly, a couple of the guys in the band, the touring band, were believers as well. We didn't go hardcore. You know, everybody's got a little bit different thought process on that, but I think living that life, not just saying it, but, you know, like, how do I act and what's my life look like? Is that interesting? Does that bring about curiosity? And I think ultimately it did with him. I had heard afterwards, and I've never asked him point blank, but I'd heard afterwards that he came to Christ. And the story that I heard was firsthand from the guy who led him in that process. And he had quotes that you would have to know Steve to know the quotes. And then, like, we had lunch a couple years ago, and it was funny, man. I don't know how much of this I should tell you, but he actually listens to Christian radio sometimes. And you know who he really digs? He likes Toby Mac.
Well, I mean, who doesn't? But that's
right.
super cool.
But it was just funny. Like, he was like, "Dude, that guy's legit, man." Like, I thought, man, things I'd never thought I'd hear.
That's so cool. Well, you were saying that you're a young believer at that time. Like I said, I think
Yeah.
before we have to kick you off the podcast here. No, wait, you're kicking us off.
Nice.
But, just a little bit about your story. You're a young believer. And something I guess I didn't really realize is your journey from Alaska down to California because of your family story. Can you touch a little bit about that for a quick minute?
Yeah. So born and raised up until I was 15 in Alaska. I was born in Fairbanks. Very, very, very young mom. So my mom was 19 and had 3 kids. Ended up separating from my dad, and we moved from Fairbanks down to this little fishing town called Homer. And so single mom, 3 kids, living in a cabin, no running water, no electricity.
Wow.
It was the legit Alaska hippie life. My mom was a singer-songwriter, and she got me into music really young. And she kind of exposed all my brother and my sister. I was the youngest of 3. And I kind of was the one who kept coming back, and it instantly resonated. Like, I remember she handed me a mandolin, and it was just something about it that really lit me up. And so she ended up dating this fisherman named John Hillstrand. He's the father of the guys that you've probably seen on Deadliest Catch, the guys on the Time Bandit. So they're my ex-stepbrothers. That was my upbringing, was the youngest of then 8.
Wow.
In a very, very dysfunctional home, domestic violence and alcoholism and drug abuse, sexual abuse. It was a rough go, but there were parts of it that were really great. And I have this love for the ocean and fishing, and I worked on the commercial fishing boats when I was a kid. And so it was kind of like 2 sides of my life. When I was on the boat, I was in the club with the guys. And then when I'd go play music with my mom, I was on the outs, They ended up divorcing, and the town was too small, and it was just too crazy. And so we moved down to California, and that's how I ended up getting down to what we called the lower 48. Yeah. And we moved to Modesto, and I started going to high school there. I met a girl, and who's now been my wife for 27 years.
Wow.
And through her family, actually, I came to Christ. So it was kind of crazy.
So cool. So talk a little bit about what of that made it into this new album that's coming out. I don't know. It'll come out sometime around when this episode comes out, I think. Maybe. We're discussing dates earlier.
Yeah, we're really, really up to speed. So the new record, yeah, it's been an interesting season of life for me in a bunch of ways. And I think that, like, lyrically is really represented on this record. Not that the other ones, not that I say they haven't, but I was like, I'm really happy with what this record says lyrically. So I hope people, if they take time, I hope they'll print them out and read them. Because I think sometimes it's good to really read the sentiment or the thoughts. But so the album title is Perfect Love. And the thought behind it was, and it's crazy because the record was written and recorded just before the pandemic happened. Man. And it's really interesting how, if you asked me what would solve the world's problems, I still would give the same answer, which is perfect love.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the impetus for that title, was whether it be going through real challenges or, relational difficulties or personal catastrophes or, whatever, global catastrophes. I think how we love one another, how we love each other is, at the end of the day, what counts. And it's the only thing that's going with us, is those relationships. And that's the real investment. That's the real stuff that Christ talks about, right? It was all action based. And, that's why the most kind of holy living people of the day, he was the hardest on, even though they were sort of toeing the line in terms of the outwards, but he was all over their case because he knew what was going on the inside. But I guess, I would just say how we treat one another matters, and how we love each other. And that comes from a couple different places. There's one song on the record that's something I haven't personally written before, that I wrote with Seth Mosley, that's called Let Me Love You. And it's a song from God's voice to us. And that was a new thought for me, was basically God going, hey, I see you, just let me in. because I think there's a lot of the shame factor, or we know ourselves with the fraud factor. People think I'm this, but I'm not really that. And so we run from God because we feel like we're not worthy. And he's going, I just want you to let me in, you know? And that one's got a real kind of bluesy feel to it. I was real happy with that song. There's another one called If Not for Christ that feels very hymn-esque. That one, that might be my favorite thing on the record.
That was a really good song. That one I was jamming to earlier.
Oh, awesome. So again, when I talk about the lyrics, the first verse of that song, countless times I wonder why you choose to love me. What happened with that whole first verse, and I'm talking as it sits, not one thing changed, was I went out to the lake, the local lake here, Folsom Lake, and was just having it's just been a long, difficult season, and I was journaling. I just wrote some thoughts. The guy I wrote the song with, Mitch Wong, which we've written a lot of stuff together, we were on the phone, and he was in Australia, and we were working on this house that we're in, and I didn't have a studio. So I would sit in my car on FaceTime in the driveway. Oh, man. And most of the songs that he and I wrote were written that way. I said, hey, check this out. And I texted him, or no, I read it to him over the phone. I said, because we were just talking life. And I said, yeah, I just went and I journaled this. And he said, can you send me that? And I sent it to him. And he said, we need to write that. And I was like, what? And he goes, that needs to be a song. And then I had this chorus idea, no longer dead, I am alive. And I had the tag kind of line for it and melody. And so we ended up writing that verse, and there's a little bit of a time signature thing with it, but he was like insistent on not changing a single thing about it. So it's literally a journal that we put to words, or that we put to music, and that ended up sounding like a hymn. But that's a real honest lyric on that track.
So I got the chance to listen to it, here this morning before we did this interview, before we were recording this here, and like just so much emotion. Like, who am I? That one jerks at you really hard, and I love what you say about printing out the lyrics, because there's just so much. The music component of it is so good, but just some of the lyrics you get lost in, and I think you're right. Sometimes we get lost in the music and the melody, all that, and just to print out and see the lyrics, just let that sit and sink in with you is sometimes important as well.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I try to tell people when I'm leading worship at, whatever, I go, when you're reading the words on the screens, make sure that when they go through your eyes, they pass through your heart before they exit your mouth. Because it's really easy to kind of let them go from the eyes to the mouth. And you're like, I don't really know what I just sang. I just sort of did what's on the screen. But when they can mean something to you, that's what worship in spirit and truth is. That's what it is. It's what's going on in me, the intangible.
Well, I know we've kind of run in. Actually, we're hosing somebody else over. I think we got another one lined up here.
It's such a
like I said, we just got talking gear. Like it was awesome.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it is. It's that time, isn't it?
Yeah. I've been watching the clock here, just making sure we don't hose whoever it is behind me too bad. But man, it was so fun to get to do that. Hopefully, I like what you said. Maybe we can connect a little bit later. A little bit more gear talk. I hopefully will have the Lincoln Brewster special by that point. Maybe I can stop slumming it. I mean,
let's be honest. It's embarrassing. Come on.
Yeah,
it's time.
I'm a little ashamed here.
It's time, dude. It's really time.
But I really appreciate you helping me fight past this embarrassment, just overlooking this embarrassment and having this conversation.
Now there is no shame for those who are in Christ and walk according to the Spirit, not according to the flesh, except in this case.
We've got to fix this. I need to go pray, repent.
I feel like Jesus is just standing next to you right now, just going, seriously? He's like, really, bro? Do you really want to do this way?
Oh man, so terrible. But hopefully we'll get to do this soon, and just so appreciate you hanging out with us.
Oh man, it's been my pleasure, and would love to keep chatting in the future. It'd be great.
Thanks for hanging out with us for this episode of the NRT Now podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And special thanks to Neon Feather for providing our theme music. Make sure to check out newreleasetoday.com and our socials for more great content. See you next episode.